Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on on-base reporting dashboards with Navient. If you are new to this module, on-base reporting dashboards is a powerful business analytics tool that displays database information in a visual, interactive way. It's a highly customizable interface and provides convenient views into your organization's data. If you are responsible for creating and maintaining your reports or are interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the reporting dashboards module, this is the webinar for you. In this webinar, we will show you how to create a new dashboard report, view and share it. I will highlight the more than 75 Navient created dashboard reports that provide critical on-base processing and configuration information. And I will also demonstrate a variety of advanced dashboard options. Creating a dashboard report. No one, not even manager, has access to reporting dashboards by default. To enable it, log into configuration, go to your user groups and select the reporting dashboards button, then grant the level of access that you desire. So with the aptly named no access option, these users would not even know dashboards exist inside of your on-base system. And that is, again, what everyone has by default. The administrator access has access to the admin tools for this module. And finally, the user access grants the ability to view dashboards that are assigned to or shared with the group. And additional optional settings under this group can grant limited access to configuration of those dashboards as well. Once you have granted access to the module, all further configuration takes place in the Unity client. So you'll log into the Unity client and click on the reporting button in the ribbon. And then to get to the back end, you will click on the administration tab in the lower left of the gallery tree in the dashboards menu. So what are the pieces of a dashboard report? Each report consists of one dashboard view, at least one data provider, and an optional category if you wish. Data providers are just that. They provide the data to the dashboard. Dashboards are the visual representation of the data, and then categories are for grouping the reports into a folder-like structure for sharing. There are several different kinds of data providers, and the types will vary depending on what modules you have licensed. The most commonly used ones are Custom SQL Query, which is where you can connect to data sources and retrieve data with a SQL query or stored procedure. Document Query will retrieve keyword information for documents stored in the system. Workflow Activity will retrieve data about how items have historically moved through workflow, whereas Workflow Inbox will retrieve data about how the items are currently in workflow. And then finally, WorkView will retrieve data from the WorkView application. A note about custom SQL queries. This data provider type is extremely powerful and should be used with caution. If you are not a DBA, talk to a DBA. The database is the heart and soul of your on-base system, so do not tinker with it lightly. If poorly constructed statements can hammer the database and basically bring it to its knees and impact the performance of everybody in the system. So test it thoroughly in your non-production environments to avoid potential issues and make sure that your queries are as efficient as they can be. If you are familiar and comfortable with writing SQL queries, I highly recommend that you download a copy of the Database Reporting Guide from the Hyland community to use as a reference. It lists the structures of the most commonly used tables, which helps you identify how to link the tables together, where to find your keyword tables, where to find your document metadata, etc. I still use this report guide all the time. In a general sense, these are some things that you should consider about data provider usage. So the users will need access to the data provider so that they have access to the data that they need to see. You want to build your data providers to only pull back the data you need to avoid performance issues. So use runtime parameters to further restrict the data being pulled back if you can. And again, don't pull back more than you need to pull back. So you can use data providers across multiple dashboards. So if you need the same information in different reports, you don't have to duplicate your data provider. You can assign that same data provider to multiple reports. You can also use more than one data provider in a single dashboard, which allows you to pull data from multiple sources and display it all on the same screen. So for example, if you wanted to pull data from OnBase and then also data from a third-party system using a custom SQL query, you could have one data provider for each and then reference those both in the dashboard and have that data display side by side. So data providers do run with a read uncommitted isolation level, so you will not end up locking your tables just so that you can see what's going on in the system. In other words, you're effectively using read-only access with no lock, which allows users who are making changes in OnBase, like importing new data, new documents, etc., they will still be able to do that while you are accessing these reports. Dashboard design. So when you sit down to design a report, there are several key elements that you should identify in order to help you create it successfully. What is the data that you need to see? Is it current? Is it historical? Where is the data located? Is it inside of OnBase or is it in a third-party system that you have access to? What are the user inputs that you want to require at the time of running the dashboard? Who has access to it and what level of access do they need? What filters and rules do you want to apply to further restrict the data or highlight certain data conditions? How do you want the data to be displayed overall? And do you have an example report that you can work from to sort of guide you as you design? Just like the data provider, the user needs to have access to the dashboard in order to see the presentation of the data that they've been given access to with the data provider, right? Makes sense. So there are many ways to display the data in the view, including pivot tables, standard grids, pies, gauges, range filters, choropleth maps, etc. And each dashboard can have multiple items. So one data provider needs to be assigned to each item, and each item can be assigned a different data provider. So you could have a gauge and a pie and a grid, all of those things can be on your dashboard report, and each one can be pulling from its own different data provider, or they can all be pulling from the same one. Now, one thing you cannot do is you can't have one item pull from multiple data providers, right? So a pie can only pull from one data provider. You can change it to a different one, but not multiple at the same time. So you'd have two separate pies if you want different data providers with two pies. And you're also working with live data as you build this so that you can see exactly how these reports will perform and troubleshoot. If it's not displaying the data you're expecting and it's in the system, you can work as you go and try to figure out what are you not configuring correctly so that you can fix that. All right, there are a few additional options in the administration menu that you might also find of use. You can purge the log history for configured dashboards, data providers, and a general history of executions. The import and export options can assist with migrating dashboard reports from your test environment to production. I will note, however, that if you are using a custom SQL query data provider and you do the import-export migration, you will need to vet the query structure in the destination environment because the table names and the attribute name, the number references for the IDs will not necessarily line up between environments. Often there's drift. So you can absolutely use the export import to transfer the configuration, but then go back into the data provider and vet that query and make sure that it is pointed at the correct tables in the new system. And then as of OnBase 16, on-prem customers can access external databases with an ODBC connection as well, and use a custom SQL query data provider to view that data in OnBase. It is important to note that this option is not available for Highland Cloud customers because Highland cannot reach databases outside of their network. So if you are hosting your own OnBase solution, and you can create an ODBC connection to access a third-party database, then you can use that connection to report on things through OnBase dashboards. All right, demo time. All right, so let's get into OnBase Unity client here. We will go to reporting and we will create a new report. So I'm going to create a dashboard. Create a new dashboard. I'm going to call it, oh gosh, documents. I'm not going to get fancy. I'm going to create a new data provider to go with it. I'm going to give it the same name as the report, or as the dashboard for clarity. I'm going to call document query. Okay. I'm going to use my one document type in the system is what I'm going to have it retrieve. Okay. And I don't have any security keywords in here. You can have it respect or not. It's up to you. And then if I want it to bring back keyword information, put that in here as well. Let's see, is there anything else I care about for the built-in? Nope, not particularly. Okay. And I'm going to put document date as a runtime parameter. And I'm going to make it required. Okay. Now, there's a cool thing over here. You can put in default values. You can hard code them, or you can use this stuff, which will allow you to set relative time values. So I'm going to try, there should be a year to date. Here we go. So I'm going to say year to date. There's not a whole lot in my system, so I feel confident that this is not going to pull back too much data. My advice generally when configuring these types of parameters is if you have a lot in your system and you don't know exactly how much data you're going to be pulling back, start small, right? You can always expand it, but start small so that you get a sample of the data to work with. And then as you get comfortable with what you're pulling back, you can expand that range as needed. All right, so here I can see a sample of the data that it's going to be pulling back. Now, if I had a lot of data in here, this will only ever pull back 100. So if it would normally pull back more than 100 values, it'll say, 100 of many down in the corner here. So you'll never get it to where it's going to sit here forever trying to pull back 3 million records. It'll stop at the first 100. Okay, but that's just here at this level. So once you actually go to use it, it will try to pull back everything that you ask it to. All right, so then assign whatever data providers additionally. So we've created the new one, right? We're not going to create a second one, so I'm just going to say next. And then any users or user groups, right? You can add, so I can add the manager user group. By default, when you add things, so the person who creates it gets full control. And then by default, anything additional that you add has read-only access, but you can extend that access for additional options if you choose. Okay, and then I'm done. And it's going to open the designer of the dashboard. So now I've configured the data. Now I need to tell it, how do I want the data to look? All right, so I'm going to start with a grid so that I can see what I'm working with. So I'm going to put in document ID, and I'm going to need to change that to a dimension because I don't want to do math on it. I want it to just tell me what the doc handle is. So I want number, ones, and 0 for level of precision. And now I can see my doc handle correctly. All right, we're going to go document type, document name, document date. I'm going to change it to as precise as I can make it, which is not useful. So I'm just going to change that to exact date. This time is not helpful. Okay, and then first and last name. Okay, so this is my data. Now, let me see if I can find something useful that might make an interesting other view. Let's try a chart. And we're gonna say, I'm gonna go by date, document date. Is it arguments or values? I always get them backwards. And sure enough, I think I did. Oh, no, nope, I didn't. I got them right. I do exact date. Okay. So my date range is fairly spread out here, but you can see that it's now telling me how many documents I brought in on each of these days. Move this around. If I want, I can put in a pinch bar, range filter. Okay, and I'm going to do document date, exact date, and document name. Okay, so in this, I like to put up at the top too. Okay, so with a pinch bar, the data will change in the other items using the same data provider as I use this to filter what I wanted to display. So you can also just click on various things in here in the grid to, well, that's not useful. This one, right? So if I wanted to see, only show me that one, you can filter on there by clicking on the little funnels. And you can sort by that too. By default, the grid will sort from left to right, top down. You can click on this arrow over here to change the direction of the default sort, but it will always sort from left to right. That you can't change. So that is the basic creation of a dashboard. So I'm going to save and close that. And so in the gallery, here's my dashboard report right here that I've created, and I've shared it with the manager group. So you can further share it here. And that's about it for a basic dashboard. I want to show you a little bit of a fancy one that I created earlier. So I'm going to go to, do I have it in here? Yep, I'm going to do my search. So heat map test. So this is a dashboard that I configured with a choropleth map. And I happen to know that this data is not displaying correctly. I should be seeing more states light up than I'm seeing. So I'm going to go into the design mode and see if I can't fix it. So if I look at the attribute that is being used to light up the map, I see it's pulling state, which is the right attribute, but again, I should be seeing more data, and I can prove it by adding a grid and throwing the state column in here. I can see there's a lot more going on here than I should be seeing. So I'm going to take a look back at this object again, and I'm going to click on this link. What is it binding to? Well, look at that. It is binding to the wrong attribute. So I'm going to change that to bind to postal. Now it lights up the way it should. So that's just a quick and dirty example of a choropleth map. There are several default map options. Let's see, here we go. So here's the defaults. You can import your own custom map It is a bit fiddly. You need to make sure that it's as small as possible. I believe Highland recommends you use DevExpress, I think, when you're doing CorePleth maps. There is some information on it in the reporting dashboard. I think it's in the reporting dashboard's module reference guide. Yeah, play around with it, see if you can make it happy. I have seen it be problematic if you try to throw too much granularity at it. For example, all of the zip codes in the United States might be a little much. But although with this is a default map, that might work. So if you did maybe all of the zip codes in the state of Texas for which there's no default map, that might take a little massaging to get it right. But at any rate, that is an example of a CorePleth. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh yes, the Navient Dashboards bundle. There are, at last count, I believe 76 reports in the current version of the bundle, including various reports of these different categories. The email distribution and the IDLE dashboards are two that I created, which have proven very helpful over time with troubleshooting. The email one is very widely used, I would say, because everybody has that. And it helps you, I'll demo it in a second. And then the IDLE one is pretty useful for folks using IDLE. So this is from the pre-full text search days, right? So the IDLE module versus the FTS module. If you don't have this bundle, or if you have an older version of it and you want the newer reports, reach out to Navient support to get the ball rolling. If you are a Navient customer, if you have a maintenance agreement with us, you will get this bundle for free if you have the reporting dashboards module. We're not going to give you the module, but we will give you the bundle if you have it. If you are not a Navient customer, if you don't have an SLA with us and you're still interested in the bundle, reach out to your account manager for details on what this could look like for you. All right. Oh, before I get into advanced options, I just want to show you real quick. So let me close this. Sure. Yeah, I'll save those changes. All right. So here's the Navient bundle. Lots of reports in here, as you can see. I don't have any emails in this system, I don't think. So I don't know if I'm really going to be able to show you data on this dashboard, but I can give you a general idea of specific years. See if we have anything in here. Nope, nothing in my demo. All right. But sort of a general sense, this very top is the range filter that I showed you earlier. So that's that pinch bar. So if you pick a date range, you can then filter it after you've brought the data back. This next section will show you any emails that are currently queued up and waiting for OnBase to send out. And then, of course, you get the count, the overall count there. This will tell you the number of emails sent per day for your date range. And then at the bottom here, you get a detailed view of each email that went out and whether or not it succeeded. So this right here in this little key header, it gives you the information that you need to identify whether or not an email was successfully passed from OnBase to the Exchange server. Once it gets to the Exchange server, it's out of OnBase's hands. So if a user claims they never got an email, you can come in here, you can search for the date that they should have gotten that email, right? And then look for that user in here and see if, first of all, if the email was in here at all, right? And if it is, then did it succeed or fail? And if it succeeded, then OnBase did its job. And then check with the Exchange server level, or maybe it's in the person's quarantine or their spam. But OnBase created the email as far as it was concerned. So very, very helpful dashboard. or if there's any others in here that you might want to display. Oh, where's the auto? I know what I want. Security keywords and security overrides. So some of these dashboards are really helpful. And again, I don't have any settings in here, but there are settings in config that are not easily organized they're not easily displayed in a way that is convenient. So if you're wanting to understand why a user can't see a thing and you think maybe you've got a security override or a security keyword and you're not quite sure where it might be configured, this dashboard pulls all of that information into one place. So rather than hunting and pecking through config, you can just come straight to this dashboard and you can see what all security keywords and overrides you have configured and whether or not that would be impacting the user who's complaining that they can't see a thing. So there's a lot of that kind of administrative reporting going on in this bundle that is there to help the admins find what they need more quickly. There's also some performance metric data in here too that is useful for the scanning and other such. But let's get back to advanced options. All right. Display actions. So with display actions, you can open documents, workview objects, workflow queues, folders, and even other dashboard reports directly from the data referenced on a dashboard. So for example, the nav cleanup items is one of the dashboards in the bundle that I have configured this option for. And the top half of the dashboard lists the documents in OnBase that have a document date in the future. So clicking on the row for that document in the report will open that document up in OnBase, where you can then reindex it to the correct value and resolve that issue. So you can get straight to your stuff without having to go search for it once you see it in here. So let's see how that's configured on the back end. So the first step is to include the document handle of the document, also known in the database as item num or content num, depending on which table you're looking at. And that's the one that you need to include in your data provider display column. So then when you're configuring the dashboard, you need to add that column to the item in the dashboard. You can add it to the column section and have it be a visible element if you want, or you can add it to the hidden dimension section if you want to use it to just be there for configuration purposes only. So the only thing about, deciding whether or not to put it on visible or hidden is that if the document handle is the only thing guaranteeing uniqueness about a row, then I would put it in the visible. Otherwise, if you have other things that you're displaying, like if for document name, if we know that the document name is going to be unique for any given document in the system, then you can put it in the hidden and it won't confuse OnBase when you click on the row as to which document it should be opening. So then once you've added that to the item, if you go to the properties of the dashboard, click on the display actions tab and add a new action to display the document and reference that item num. To configure the display action to display a file cabinet folder, you'll need the folder ID for the event data instead of the document ID. And likewise, queue ID to display a workflow queue, item ID to display another dashboard report, etc. For workview objects, you will need both the class ID and the object ID. And then as a side note, display actions will not trigger in design mode. So if you're configuring it on the back end and you can't figure out why when you're in design and you double click on a thing, it's not opening, it's because it won't trigger in design mode. So you configure it on the back end and then switch back to the gallery and then it will trigger. All right, web viewer was added in version 18. Oh, excuse me, version 15. This is separate from the OnBase web client, where you can also view dashboards. And as such, it has a separate installer included in the reporting dashboards license, which goes with, it goes on the server, this particular installation. The intent of the web viewer is to allow users who do not have access to the Unity or web clients to still view dashboards. It's also worth noting that features that interact with OnBase in a secondary fashion, such as display actions, are not available in either web-based views. So the display actions will work in the Unity client. It will not work in the web client. It will not work in the web viewer. On the client side, after you've installed the web viewer on the server, there are 4 parameters that need to be configured in the Unity client config file to allow the Unity client to interact with the web viewer. The first 2 are service mode and Unity pop, which both have to be set to true. And next is email link as, which should be set to web link. As of version 17, the UPOP file option should also work. The last of the 4 is the reporting web viewer URL, which needs to be pointed to the URL for the server-side install wherever you put it. And then these latter 2 settings have to be updated manually, and every time you update the Click Once package, if you're using one, as there is no wizard interface to set them. So if you're using Click Once, remember that you need to go back and modify that every time you update your Click Once package. So those 4 settings combined will allow OnBase users to create URLs that then can be used in the web viewer. So to create a web viewer URL, open the target dashboard in the Unity client and select Copy Hyperlink from the Copy to Clipboard menu drop-down options. And you'll be presented with some additional options depending on how the dashboard is configured and how you want the users to be able to interact with it, right? So do you want to share it in such a way that it always has a specific set of parameters? Or do you want them to be able to enter in their own criteria for the report when they display the dashboard? Once you're satisfied with the settings, click the copy link button at the bottom to copy the URL to the clipboard, and then paste it into a browser to view the dashboard. This is what it'll look like. And as you can see here, the web viewer has a dark mode that can also be configured on the server side. If nothing displays in the browser when you enter the URL, particularly if you're still using IE, make sure the display intranet sites in compatibility view setting is unchecked, because that can interfere with web viewer display. Calculated fields. OnBase 16 saw the introduction of calculated fields. It seems like a small thing, but it's actually pretty powerful. To create a calculated field, open the dashboard in design mode and select your data source from the dropdown if you've assigned more than one to the report, right? Because you can have multiple data providers. So you want to make sure that you're on the one that you want to be configuring your calculated field from. So then right-click on the lower part of the pane in that tree and select Add Calculated Field. So that's where you're doing the data provider. And then you're going to click the Add Calculated Field and enter your expression in the editor and click OK. So you have access to functions, constants, operators, and the columns that are part of that data provider. And then you will now see a calculated field 1, in a calculated field subsection with your new field in it. To rename it, if you want, there's a right-click menu assigned to it. You can also use that to edit the expression if you want to change it. It's the right-click menu. Okay. And Why are we going back again? There we go. All right. When performing an action on a dashboard being fed by multiple data providers, you can export data, and it will create a separate worksheet in the Excel file for each data provider. So if you have a dashboard, it has one data provider, you use export data, you will get one tab. If you have a dashboard that has two data providers and you do export data provider, you will get two tabs, one for each data provider. Fun fact, Excel worksheet labels are limited to 32 characters. So the tabs are named based on the name of the data provider. So if the two data providers are identically named within the first 32 characters, OnBase will throw an error and fail to export. So you need to make sure that you have uniqueness in your data provider names within the first 32 characters. And then you can export your data. It also note that it exports from the data provider, not from the display, right? So if your data provider is returning your gross data, and then the dashboard display has rules and filters that show less, when you do the export data, you're going to get all of it. You're not going to get what's in the display. You're going to get what's in the data provider. So these are the little buttons in the upper right corner where you can, as of version 17, do a more granular export. So you can export, rather than the overall export data to get everything from the data provider, you can click on one individual item in the report to export just its data, right? So by clicking on the upper right corner of that item. So if I only want to see the grid data, I can click on its little button to export it. So from this menu, you can export to PDF, image, or Excel. All three options will allow you to include any custom filters or parameter settings that you have applied to the display at the time of export. I'm not sure that's actually true. The guide says it is, but I have not seen that actually work correctly. So if you get it to work, I'd really like to know. All right, so while the export data button will give you the overall data like so, export to Excel will give you the massaged version of the data in the selected widget so that you don't have to do the calculations all over again by hand. The export to PDF and export to image options will give you the friendly graphical display. The PDF option is generally more useful for grid displays when the open dashboard does not have enough room to display all of the text on the screen. If you change the page layout and size, it can expand the columns during the export to fill the available width. Unfortunately, there's still no option to export a graphical layout of a dashboard as a whole, but this is what you can do. All right, WorkView filter data providers. The ability to reference WorkView data is another feature that was available since the beginning of dashboards, actually, but until version 18, the only way to get at the data was via custom SQL query. This could be made somewhat easier by configuring a reportable view with all of the data that you need to simplify the query, but you still had to write the query. Now there is a data provider option that will let you link directly to the filter with just a few clicks. The first step is to create a WorkView filter as you normally would, and you do not need to make it reportable. Remember to include both the class ID and the object ID if you want to configure display options to open a WorkView object right from the dashboard report. So to configure it, after you've saved that filter in Studio, you need to create a module association in the WorkView ribbon to make it visible to dashboards. So first you create the filter, in Studio, and then you make the module association so that the Unity client can see it for that side. So click on module associations in the ribbon, click add, click reporting dashboards, and then select your application from the dropdown, filter that you want to assign, click next. Excuse me. Make any adjustments that you want in the naming convention, and then click next. Be careful to make sure that your module association names are all unique. OnBase will allow you to assign the same name to multiple entries, and then dashboards will have issues trying to reference the right one. So for some reason, this is referenced by name, not by ID. So make sure they're unique. All right, assign your user groups that you want to have access to it. And again, this is the same user group that needs to have access to the data provider and to the dashboard needs to have access to the module association in order to see the thing. And then confirm your choices and click finish. Save the repository and do an IIS reset. This step does require a full IIS reset. Cache reset is not enough. Sad because WorkView. Once that's been done, then you can go back to the Unity client and you can create a new data provider. So you'll create a new data provider. On the data type screen, you will select WorkView and then click next. Select your module association from the dropdown. And it's important to note that this is a one-way operation. So you can't point this data provider at a different module association once you've saved the new data provider. Also, if you rename the module association in Studio, the configured data provider will no longer be able to find it. So select with care. So if you need to change it, you'll have to create a new data provider. Select the display options that you want to include from the filter. And then if you configured any user prompts on the filter, they will show up as input parameters here. So that tab. And you'll need to switch to that tab to select them as well. And then click next to configure the, I got lost. The remaining data provider settings as usual to set the default input parameters if needed and assign the user groups, etc. All right. So that concludes our tour of dashboards for today. So again, it is very powerful, very customizable, gives you a lot of different ways to present data to your end users. And if you want the bundle, if you want more information about dashboards, please reach out to Navient customer support and we will assist you in getting that module or getting that bundle. So thank you for attending the webinar and have a lovely rest of your day.